Every office has its silences. But not all silence is peaceful. At Collins Global, the silence was weaponized. Quiet meetings behind glass, glances traded like currency, and whispers that echoed louder than shouts. The kind of silence that said, something is going on. Richard Collins was the kind of CEO who made you sit straighter when he entered a room. Mid-50s, trim, tailored, tanned, hair always slicked with intent, voice like fine gravel. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He had the kind of power that made people want to agree just so they could stay close to it. But lately, they weren't just watching him. They were watching her. Sophie Miller, his personal assistant, late 20s, immaculate blowout, tasteful perfume that lingered in the hall just a little too long after she passed. She wasn't loud. She didn't have to be. She knew when to laugh, how to tilt her head, how to whisper, "Mr. Collins," like it meant something more. People noticed. The lunches that lasted too long, the strategy meetings behind closed doors, the way Sophie entered his office without knocking, the way she exited, lipstick refreshed. Of course, no one said anything, not to Richard, not out loud, but in the break room, in the bathroom stalls, in private group chats under vague names like Project Delta, the story was writing itself. At home, Elizabeth Collins noticed too. She wasn't the jealous type. She had been with Richard for 19 years. She knew the signs, the longer showers, the unread messages, the lipstick smudged on a shirt collar that smelled like peony and power. But what stung wasn't the betrayal. It was the familiarity. This wasn't the first time, but it would be the last. In their bedroom closet, behind her old scarves and winter coats, Elizabeth found the pouch, a black velvet zip case. Inside, a silver wall clipper, still wrapped in silk. A gift from her father, a barber who taught her that dignity could be shaped or shaved. She stared at it, then at her own reflection, and something inside her clicked. Meanwhile, back at Collins Global, the whispers were turning into warnings. He's playing with fire. She's not just a secretary anymore. His wife's gonna find out. But Richard didn't care. He was invincible, or so he thought. He was the king of his tower, and kings don't look down until the floor is gone. One Thursday afternoon, Sophie lingered longer than usual. The blinds were drawn. The door was locked. Music was playing low from Richard's private speaker. Jazz, always jazz, smooth, distracting. Their hands weren't on paperwork. That's when the elevator dinged again. Not the usual pace, no hesitation. And that was the last moment of peace Richard Collins would ever know.
Elizabeth Collins didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. She just watched. Watched the subtle ways her world had shifted. Watched the spaces between her husband's lies grow longer and more expansive. She had always known Richard's hunger for power. She helped him build it, brick by brick, year by year. But she also knew something Richard had forgotten. Every empire carries the seeds of its own collapse. He just never thought the first crack would come from her. The silver clippers fit perfectly into her purse. They were heavier than she remembered, or maybe her hand had simply grown steadier. She didn't pack rage, she packed precision. One tool, one mission, and 2 guards, discreet, loyal, quiet. Men she didn't hire for muscle, she hired them for witness. Because today, Richard would not be able to lie. Richard's office sat on the 42nd floor, soundproofed, secure. His little kingdom in the sky, but not secure enough. As the elevator rose, Elizabeth adjusted her coat. Not a wrinkle out of place, not a heartbeat wasted. By the time the doors opened, her face was set, not in anger, in conclusion. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. She walked in, and there they were. Richard, shirt half-buttoned, his belt undone. Sophie, lips smeared, perched on the edge of his lap like a prize. Their eyes went wide, then still. Time didn't stop. It surrendered. She said nothing. From her bag, she withdrew the silver clipper, quietly, like it was a ritual. The moment the sound filled the room, the illusion shattered. Sophie screamed, shrill, panicked. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a chair.
Oh my God, what is she doing?
But Elizabeth didn't flinch. She had no interest in Sophie. The girl was a symptom. The disease sat in the leather chair. Richard tried to speak, to reason, to command, but his voice cracked, and Elizabeth raised one hand, not to strike him, but to silence him.
Sit still.
Her tone didn't rise, it cut. The guards moved in, flanking the door. Sophie froze in the corner, trembling, clutching her phone but too scared to move. Even she knew, this wasn't the kind of video you delete. Elizabeth stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, the other hovering the clippers just above his scalp. He smelled of fear, of cologne and cowardice. She leaned down, and in a whisper only he could hear, she said,
You wanted to feel young again. Let me show you what a fresh start looks like.
Then she clicked the blade into motion. She dragged the clippers down the center of his skull. A clean path of pale scalp split the darkness. Hair fell forward, landing softly on his lap like ashes. The king was falling, one strip at a time, and the room watched in silence.
The first had been surgical, deliberate, a perfect line shaved down the center of his skull, like parting the sea. But Elizabeth didn't stop there. She worked slowly, intentionally, not like someone cutting hair, like someone unmaking a man. Each stroke of the clipper peeled back a layer of vanity, a layer of power, a layer of Richard Collins the world thought it knew. She went from the crown to the sides, then back around, methodical, mechanical, merciless. Outside the office, someone had cracked the door open. One intern, then two, then four. Phones in hand, mouths agape. The great CEO, once the man no one dared interrupt, was now reduced to a half-shaved skull and a look of naked terror. He didn't speak, couldn't. His mouth opened several times, but no words came. Just the sound of hair falling, soft, final. He was still in his shirt, still in his slacks, but stripped of what mattered most to him. Image, control, fear. Elizabeth wasn't angry, not anymore. She was surgical, like a woman cutting out a tumor that had been growing silently for years. She circled the chair slowly, examining her work, as if shaving away every lie he ever told her. Sophie had stopped crying, but her hand still trembled. She pressed her back to the glass wall, eyes darting to the door, as if someone might save her. But no one did. No one moved. Not the guards, not the staff watching through the door, and not Richard. Because this wasn't a punishment anymore. This was history. When Elizabeth finally shut the clippers off, you could hear a pin drop. Richard sat still, tiny cuts across his scalp from trembling skin, neck reddened from shame, jaw clenched so tight it twitched. Hair covered his shoulders, his lap, the floor. But what stunned him most was the cold. He never knew how cold a bare head could feel. One intern took a photo, then another, then video, then live stream. Hashtags began forming before the first post hit the feed. Hashtag CEO unmasked. Hashtag Collins collapse. Hashtag buzzed in real time. She looked at her work, not with satisfaction, but with closure. Then she set the clippers on his desk. Next to the watch he gave Sophie. Next to the wedding photo he moved to the drawer months ago.
Power doesn't come from fear, Richard. It comes from respect, and you will never be respected again.
She turned to Sophie, didn't say a word, just looked her in the eye. The way you look at a smudge on glass that was never worth wiping off. Then she walked out. 2 guards followed. The hallway cleared. And Richard? He stayed there, frozen, bald, broadcast, broken.
At 8:12 a.m. the next day, the video had been reposted to 47 channels. By 9:03, it had its own hashtag. By noon, it was global. It wasn't some shaky, low-res recording. The footage was crisp, perfectly framed. The moment the silver clippers buzzed to life, the first pass down the center of his head, the panic in his eyes, the tears in hers, it was all there, raw, undeniable, devastating. Within hours, it was dubbed in 5 languages. Reaction videos exploded across YouTube. People broke it down frame by frame. Hairstylists, psychologists, body language experts. Watch how he flinches. That's not dominance, that's fear. This is symbolic emasculation in real time. She stripped his power with precision. It wasn't just gossip. It became cultural, corporate, historic. Hashtag buzzed by Elizabeth. Hashtag no more King Richard. Hashtag sheared CEO. Hashtag shame on the 42nd floor. The memes were brutal. The think pieces were worse. And the boardroom? Silent. No one returned Richard's calls. The PR team quit en masse. The stock dropped 18% in 36 hours. Sponsors pulled out. 2 partnerships terminated. 1 hedge fund sued. An emergency board meeting was held. Richard wasn't invited. He was
relieved of duties indefinitely
via email. Not even a call. Not even his assistant, because Sophie Miller had vanished. Gone. No resignation letter, no voicemail, no trace. Her apartment cleared out, her desk wiped clean. A final security camera captured her at the airport wearing sunglasses and a black cap, hair pulled tight, or maybe cut off. No one could tell. No one cared. And Elizabeth? She didn't say a word to the press. No interviews, no post, no exclusive sit-down with morning TV. She let the silence work. Until one photo, just one, posted without caption, no filter, no tag. The photo showed Richard's chair, empty, pushed slightly off-center, facing the window of the 42nd floor. No man, no crown, just the reflection of a clean, cold skyline, and resting on the desk, the silver clippers. The caption read, "Power looks different without hair." The post reached 1 million likes in under a day. Journalists called it iconic. PR experts called it lethal. Women's magazines called her the new face of quiet wrath. Some said she left the country. Others said she bought back half the shares and sat silently at the next board meeting in a gray suit and black gloves. No one knew. No one could confirm. And no one ever forgot. Richard Collins never returned to the office. He retreated to a villa, or a treatment center, or somewhere with no mirrors, because shame, true shame, isn't loud. It doesn't need press. It lingers. It hums. It buzzes in your head like clippers you can still hear in your dreams.